Hello and welcome to today's presentation, Savvy Women Smart Investors. We are happy to be attending and providing you with hopefully some good sound bites. And just to introduce myself, I am Margie Cosmerl. I am a financial advisor. Our company name is Blue Heron Financial Group, and we are associated with LPL Financial for 23 years, hard to believe. Also on is Liz David, our resident CFP, and she and I will be sharing today's presentation. And in just a minute, we'll get started.
Thank you all so much for joining us.
So here's what we want to tackle today, and this is directed to what I would normally say the women in the room, but the women on the virtual room today. So this is what we want to address, and that is that we as women do have some very unique and different challenges than our male counterparts. Not to say good, bad, or indifferent, but we want to be sure that we are addressing and that we're providing good sound education that will help you moving forward. So we want to make sure that you know financial matters at different life stages and how to navigate those, because each of those life stages that we'll be getting into, they have some different twists along the way. And as mentioned, some of the challenges and how we can circumvent those challenges by having good education.
All right, so what keeps you up at night? 2020 has probably brought more things that keep us up at night, but again, hopefully today, just to bring some education, we hope to make it educational, bring some light to it, share our experiences. And Margie hit the nail on the head. You know, every stage of life brings different concerns and different things that might keep you up at night. Early life stage, we'll say, you know, post-college, paying off college debt, finding a job, what are you going to do with your future? You know, those are really the things that weigh on you day in and day out, generally speaking. Midlife, you know, your career, marriage, and finances, whole department in itself. Caring for a child or an ill spouse or a parent or sibling. Focusing on retirement, you know, and we say midlife, you know, you might be in your 30s and having kids, but also focusing on retirement is important. And then everything in between. I think that everything captures, you know, homeschooling and childcare and all of that stuff in between. Later stages in life, really focusing on healthcare. You know, Marge and I often say that, you know, 10 years ago, we didn't talk a whole lot about healthcare, but it is a daily conversation with our pre-retirees and retirees. Social security planning, again, another thing that we didn't spend a ton of time on in the past, but Social security is an important part of retirement planning and understanding your options and you know, how to get Social Security, when to get Social Security, how it impacts your long-term is so important because it's a permanent decision. And building that Social Security over the years is something you want to be cognizant of too. Outliving money, obviously longevity, you know, the biggest goal is to not run out of money. So planning for all of those things. I think an important thing to think about too, you know, Margie said, you know, we're here to help, we're here to educate, but just reminding you that you're not alone. You know, financial advisors are out there. You want to find somebody that you trust and that does this every day. We could never go sit at somebody's desk and be an engineer or be an attorney. You know, we wouldn't never clean our own teeth. So again, you know, find somebody who's an expert who has your best interest at heart. You're not alone, and it's never too early to start and it's never too late to start. So I think oftentimes it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. When you're 24 and, you know, I just talked to some clients on Zoom recently and their recent college graduate daughter was in the background and, you know, you can tell her only concern right now is I need to find a job, much less talk about savings. And then you think about the other folks who, especially women, you know, whether you find yourself taking care of the household finances later in life, you know, you might think, oh my gosh, I'm just too late. It's never too early. It's never too late. So we're going to dive into each of these. Again, we'll try and add some levity. This slide makes me cringe and makes me laugh at the same time. This is literally straight out of a home economics textbook from the 1950s, and underneath of here, it had all the examples of what you need to do to be a good wife. I hope that most of us are laughing at this, but basically it was telling us that we needed to make sure the kids were bathed and on their best behavior and calm and quiet when dad walked in the door, and a warm dinner was on the table and a cold drink as well, and make sure he was comfortable. And that was the then the 1970s brought this revival of women getting into the workforce. So again, it's just not where we are today. Totally different.
Liz, quick question for you. Did you have home ec class when you were in high school? You did? Okay.
I think that was like the last one. So
okay.
I really don't think that my younger cousins had it.
I was wondering where that stopped.
It's not far after me.
Yeah.
So again, we all hopefully can laugh at, but realize that, sometimes getting dinner on the table is still part of our to-do list, but it's not the only thing on our to-do list for sure. Right now, women make up 49% of the breadwinners in the family, and 51% of women are in management or professional occupations, which we just love seeing. Again, it really is this big shift from that 1950s illustration of women just being at home to being in the workforce, full on, and sometimes again the family's breadwinner. And how do we address that? How do we take care of everything on both sides? So starting out early, again, think about being recently out of college, and this is a whole new time frame too, being recent out of college. Things to think about: amount you owe on current loans. So, student loans, Marge and I often say that there's necessary debt and then there's bad debt. Student loans, hopefully going into college, you had some idea of what amount that was, and it just wasn't, you're going to take out the maximum amount and build that up and all of that. But really focusing on those loans and looking at what your interest rate is. It's important. Don't just defer it because you can defer it, because that interest rate, the cost of borrowing is continuing to add to the amount that you owe. Again, look at the interest rates. It's a really good idea to maybe create a little spreadsheet and understand, here's how much I owe, here's the interest rate, and what's my payment, so you can kind of track what does that look like over time. Credit score is something that is so important early on. I remember I went to Clemson in South Carolina, go Tigers, and my freshman year, they were literally handing out credit card applications at the gates of football games, and if you filled it out, you got a free Clemson t-shirt. So, here are these kids at 18, 19 years old filling out a credit card application and getting a free t-shirt, not really understanding how credit works. So get your head around credit and how it works. Look at your credit score. Margie and I both use something called the Credit Karma app. That's not, promoting that or anything, but it's a good way to see what your score is, see what's out there. And it's important to watch because there is identity theft out there, but it's also going to be a good foundation to help you, get a car loan, maybe you want to look at buying a house. That has a major impact. I think these are important things to look at. So what impacts your credit score is a great question. Amount you owe on loans, yes. Interest rates on the debt, yes. Payment history is number one. So you want to make sure you pay those bills on time. Don't say, oh, well, I'll just wait until it's 30 days and they start calling me and then I'll make a payment over the phone or something. Make it on time. Length of credit history. So again, this is maybe your parents added you to a credit card when you were younger. But the longer you have proved that somebody is willing to lend you money and you pay it back on time and with consistency, the better that's going to be for your credit score. Credit mix. This basically means, car loan, credit card, student loans. You don't have all your debt in student loans or all your debt in credit cards. Current salary actually does not impact your credit score. So that's a common misconception. Your credit score really is not impacted by your income. So you can start building that credit score before you even find a job.
I just wanted to reiterate before we switch slides, just because it came up today and it came up last week when reviewing cash flow with clients, that they had no idea what interest rate they're being charged on their credit card. And it's vitally important because there are rates out there still of 18+%. And there are sometimes ways to get that reduced, whether it's through credit card consolidation somewhere, or just simply asking that lender to reduce the rate. So I just wanted to touch on that while I'm thinking about it.
Good ways to keep your credit score healthy, and I kind of touched on this, but pay the bills on time. Setting up automatic payments is a great one. One thing that we will also say is if you're setting up automatic payments on your checking account, have a savings account there as an overdraft protection. Don't have that go. I'll pick on my husband because he's not here. When we first got married, he had his overdraft tied to a personal loan that was unsecured and like a 19% interest rate. So, make sure you build up that 3 to 6 months worth of savings of expenses. So if your expenses are $2,000 a month, it's so vitally important to build up a short-term, call it $6,000, $12,000 in a bank, credit union, money market, or savings account. It's not going to earn a whole lot, but it's really going to be a great buffer that when your car needs new tires or you need to move out of your parents' house, you have somewhere to turn to. And again, it's great to have that overdraft protection attached to there. Keeping credit card balances low. Margie and I are huge advocates for pay that credit card off every single month whenever feasible. You really don't want to get into a point, again, Margie just touched on it, but if it's, let's just say 20% interest, that's a snowball that if you have $1,000 on there and you pay $200, that's really just the interest for the year. So it's hard to kind of climb out of that hole. Only open new credit when needed. This is another big one. So every time you go to a store, if you're going to get 20% off, don't open the card just to get the 20% off necessarily. Pick a few good cards that you're going to use, maybe 2 or 3, and stick with those. Don't have a store credit card for everywhere you go. And check your credit score once a year for free. Again, this is showing creditkarma.com. I know there is an app now, and then annual credit report. Sometimes your credit cards will provide it too. And really look through it. Don't just look at the number, just because you see a 740, that's good, but look and see what's on there. See what's making it go higher, see what's making it go lower. Make sure everything is truly yours and not some bogus credit card bill out there that was never you.
Yeah. It's a great check.
All right, so this is a good rule of thumb to start out. People often say, how much can I afford? We are also big proponents of having a budget. We have a great budget worksheet that we're happy to share. It basically, in one side, it gives your income and what your take-home pay is. The other side, it helps you think about what are my expenses and really put pen to paper. But a good rule of thumb is spending 50% at most on necessities. So, mortgage, rent, car bills, student loan payments, groceries, etc. So really figuring out that you're not going to spend more than 50% of your take-home pay on things that you have to have. 30% to wants. Again, this has some wiggle rooms, whether that's vacations or dining out, clothes, all that stuff. And 20% towards financial goals. So again, depending on your time frame, paying yourself first is a great way to think about this. I think sometimes people look at it like an expense, but really paying yourself first and getting on sound financial footing early in life is going to benefit you in spades long term. So you'll thank yourself, every year going forward if you can really get yourself on sound financial ground early on. And whether you're earmarking that 20% to build up that short-term savings that we just talked about, if you say, okay, I don't have any liquid savings, then a portion should go there. If you're working for a company, we're going to dive into this, that has a 401k plan, setting that up, whether it's Roth IRA or a house to buy a new car, a house to buy a home, an account to buy a home, just really being clear with what your goals are and then earmarking 20 plus or so percent towards that. All right, this is really interesting. I know it might look a little bit technical, but stick with us here. Time is your best friend when it comes to saving. So if you are just looking at $1,000 invested and the power of, hang tight, we're having some technical difficulties here. If you look at just the power of investing in time, if you had $1,000 and you invested it, and you were just, let's say, putting it in a CD at the bank, which might not get 3% in today's world, but let's go with it. You put it in a 3% CD. After 20 years, you've made $800. After 30 years, now it's at 24, 27. And at 40 years, you're at 32.62. So your money has tripled in 40 years just at a 3% rate of return. If we look at 6%, you can see here that grows much quicker. So think maybe a balanced conservative mutual fund. You invest here, $1,000 in just 30 years has grown more than 5 times. Again, that's the power of time. And then the last one is going to be a more aggressive investment, obviously, but $1,000 grows to $45,000 after 40 years. And that's just one single investment. We're going to look later at the power of dollar cost averaging and adding over time. But again, starting early is so important. And even if it's $25 a month, whatever you can do, getting some money invested for your long term will help you tremendously when you have that power of compounding interest over time.
Yeah, I always like the rule of 72. If it's growing at 7%, it will be around doubling in 10 years. So you can apply that any which way, or if it's growing at 10% in 7 years. So it's just something good to keep in the back of one's mind.
Yep. Things to think about, benefits are a huge part of the job search, and pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, even, the benefits are important. They're even more important now. But as you're on your job search and looking for things, that salary is always attractive, but also understanding what your company is offering has a dollar value. Retirement plan, what does your company offer in terms of a 401k match? Is it, no match at all? Or is it 1% for every 3% you put in? Really understand what you need to put in order to get that company match and understand the value of that. It's free money. Marge and I often say, you don't want to put that 401k on hold and miss out on that free money. Vesting period, this basically is saying how long do you have to stay at the company to be vested in their contribution. So sometimes that might say maybe it's 2 to 5 years, whatever the case might be, or maybe you're not eligible to contribute for 6 months until 6 months that you've been there. The day that you're eligible to contribute, even if that vesting period seems long, your money is always your money. So make sure that you start contributing to the retirement plan when it's an option. Health insurance coverage is another huge piece of the puzzle. Understand what kind of coverage they offer. Is there some sort of, do they pick up a piece of the cost? Is there HSA, health savings account, as an option? If having kids is something that's on your radar, really understand what their maternity, paternity, adoption leave scenarios look like. We'll talk more about that in, I'll say, the middle life chapter. Tuition reimbursement and student loan repayment is, I say, a new phenomenon, but it's wonderful. So maybe you want to go get your master's, and maybe your parents say, okay, we've helped you with the first 4 years. The next chapter is on you. Maybe you find a company who is willing to reimburse you for some of those tuitions that you pay to go get your master's. And then student loan reimbursement or repayment assistant is also, that's a new phenomenon, because kids are coming out of school with a significant amount of debt that really can put it can make it more difficult to move forward, even if you have a good income, if a lot of that is going towards student loan repayment. And so finding a company that may be helping you there, if that's part of your picture, might be a good benefit to look for. Anything to add there, Margie?
Well, just on the whole student loan in college, and as we make our way through the next section on kind of midlife considerations, but this comes to mind, when our kids are getting ready for college or going into college, let's really be giving some thought as to what profession they're going to college for and what those costs are for that 4 years, or what might be those additional years, versus what their occupation pay may eventually be. Because a lot of times I feel like we've seen some disconnect. And I mean, let's face it, we love our kids. We want to make sure that, we want to take care of them. But if their earnings rate is such that number one, they're going to have a tough time paying back student loans, or those student loans fall on the parents while they're also trying to save for their own retirement. So we will talk more about this as it goes along, but I just wanted to touch on that.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. So even, again, moving into what we'll call the juggling act, middle life stage, this is where I am, and the juggling act rings very true. It's really important to start to lay sound financial ground early, because when you move into this next phase, life, it just picks up speed kind of. So it gets busy, and if you already have bad habits, it's going to be very difficult to break them, versus if you have good habits, it will put you in a much better position, and hopefully have you not stay awake as much at night worrying about things that you know are already in place. You know, already having your 401k contributions going in and not saying, oh gosh, now I need to start, and now I'm used to living on my money. It basically would feel like a pay cut at that point. So again, laying those the groundwork early is so important. This is a huge one, and Margie and we can each talk to this. You know, everybody's household runs their money differently, but we have to say communication is key. So when you are thinking about getting married, moving into marriage, have those difficult conversations. I just went to lunch with a girlfriend yesterday. She's been married for 6 years, 2 kids. They do not talk about finances. And now it's really posing some issues. So having those conversations early, you don't necessarily have to agree. Again, you heard my scenario of my husband. You know, he was more comfortable with credit card debt. That would definitely keep me up at night forever. That's just kind of who I am. But for us to communicate about that and find, you know, where our happy medium is was really important. So, you know, consider a prenuptial agreement if you really feel like money is a difficult topic that is not, you're not going to find, I'll say, middle ground on, then maybe the prenuptial is important. Comparing credit scores, savings, and spending habits is very important. You know, you want to know, you don't want to make this plan that you're going to buy a house with your fiance in 2 years and then find your perfect home and go to apply for a mortgage and find out that he's got a 550 credit score because he didn't pay his credit cards or had a short sale or anything, you know. And it's okay if that's the scenario, but you need to know it before you're up against a wall.
Yeah, going in. And in some cases, it's a second marriage. And sometimes that leads into how those finances will go from that point moving forward. And having independence, I think we've seen it more and more, but it's so important. I call it a summit meeting, my husband and I implore clients that we're working with also, at least lay the groundwork that there's an annual meeting. Set aside the time, have a kind of a retreat, maybe have a reward on the other end that you've both taken the time to do this, and each prepare their own balance sheet, each prepare their own expenses, and have that meeting of the minds and discuss the future and all that goes with it. So we can't stress enough. And whether it's, you know, we're not saying this only has to take place in a marriage. I mean, in any kind of partnership equation.
Yep, exactly. Creating a budget, again, this is probably a word you'll hear us say more than you would like today, but a budget is really important. It really gives you, and I think take the negative connotation of I'm going to have to watch every penny I spend, more of empowerment to say, I know what we spend and I know where our money goes. It truly can be empowering. And it also helps you plan for the future. So, you know, what you spend today is going to be different if 2 kids are added to the equation, or private school or college tuition, all of those things, or if you need a bigger home. But just keep that working budget for where you are month to month today, but also think about those future expenses that come down the pike. And that feeds in to working towards long-term savings goals. And long-term savings goals could be that next house. It could be college planning for the kids. It always has to include retirement from day one. Margie's heard me say this again more times than she would like, but retirement is truly the only thing you can't take a loan out for. You can take a loan out for anything in life, a car, a house, college, anything, but not for retirement. So retirement always needs to be part of that long-term picture. You don't want to say, okay, once I pay my mortgage off, then I'll start saving for retirement. Or, once I get here, then I'll do this. Make sure that that's always a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't have to be all of your free dollars, but a piece of them for sure. Updating beneficiary information is also crucial. I just talked to somebody who's been married for 5 years. They have a little boy, and we were kind of running through what she has out there, and she still had her parents listed as beneficiaries. And so making sure, it's just not something that usually sits high on the priority list. So when you get married, make sure 401k has been changed, IRA. If you have life insurance, we're going to touch on life insurance here in a second. Make sure that your spouse is listed as primary, and also always have a contingent. We all travel usually at some point in our lives with our spouse, and making sure that you have a contingent beneficiary. So God forbid something happened to both of you at the same time, the money goes where you want it and isn't determined by the courts.
Yeah, I'm going to just take that one step more on the beneficiaries. And because Liz and I are at different points in our life, however, we're both falling into this midlife of our discussion today. Where I see some problems on the beneficiary side are naming elderly parents as beneficiaries that may very well predecease the owner of the asset, and not providing contingent beneficiaries, which can create a whole quagmire. If that first beneficiary passes, there's nothing left behind as far as where that money should go, and then it's off to the court system. So beneficiaries, we talk about it every day, every week. Every asset, even bank assets, should have beneficiary information on it. It's just called a POD. Credit unions, POD, payable on death as opposed to beneficiary, or TOD, transferable on death.
Yep. This slide kind of says it all.
This just cracks me up because first glance it does not look appropriate.
Right, but it makes a point, that's for sure, that more women are single or finding their way on their own, flying solo as the slide says, at some point in our lives. So I often tell the story too that, I was on my own at least until I was 30. So I was in my, building a career until age 30 versus my grandmother, who had her first baby at 17, moved out from her parents' house in with her husband and started having kids. And she was never alone until she was in her 70s. But now she is on her own. So I kind of learned that financial independence early on, and she really had to get it baptism by fire once my grandfather passed away. So all of us are more likely to find ourselves in control of our finances alone at some point in our lives, whether by choice or just the curveball that life throws. Giving yourself the knowledge that you are not alone, even if you are taking care of finances for yourself, your sole income, individual household, you're not alone, and there are people out there that can help you work through that and help to make decisions. This seminar has been around for years, and Margie and I have used it. It used to have a piece that talked about how women can get stuck in this fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so if you know that about yourself, seek guidance from somebody who is a trusted resource. Make sure that you have somebody who's encouraging you so that you don't get stuck in not making any decisions. Building, again, your own sound financial plan makes a lot of sense. Build that cash buffer. If you are a single income household, having that cash buffer is even more important. Life insurance is something else that I did when I was single. Again, not necessarily in anticipation of kids, but having that life insurance, number one, term insurance is going to be cheaper when you're younger and likely healthier. So the purpose of insurance is to make sure that your debts don't become a burden to whoever your beneficiary is, whether that's family or whether that's husband and children. Getting some life insurance in place that you own early in life makes a lot of sense, in our opinion. It really keeps that cost down. It usually ensures that you can get the coverage, because the older we get, the unhealthier we seem to be sometimes, and that's all factors that play into life insurance coverage. On the same note, if you are single, long-term care is something that we all have to think about it, married or single, and Margie will probably talk about this later, but if you are not able to work, or not able to care for yourself, how are you going to cover that? Long-term disability through work, long-term care insurance over the long haul. Those are important things to at least educate yourself on. Again, we could do a whole seminar just on those two topics, but really taking control of your overall finances, and empowering yourself to know that you can do it.
Yeah, we'll have contact information at the end of the presentation if we can help you.
Exactly. This is also going to focus on just the power of time. Most of you probably have a 401k plan that allows for auto escalation. So again, if you know you get a 2% raise every year, or 1% raise even, increase that to your 401k. Don't get used to living on that increased income. I mean, we as Americans all tend to, if we bring it into the household, we tend to spend it. Again, I say for myself, if I had to write a check at the end of the year for what I save into retirement, the money just wouldn't be there. It would find its way to be spent somewhere. So because we force our savings and it doesn't actually come into our bank account, it really benefits us. This is going to show, again, the power of compounding interest over time and the importance of saving early and the impact of taking a break, whether that's to care for children or care for elderly parents, or maybe you just get out of the workforce altogether. Let me go back. Sorry about that. Sorry. All right. So starting contributing at age 22, 3% initial savings rate, auto escalate 1% per year up to 10%. So you start at 3% and then you say, okay, every single year I'm going to increase that by 1% until you hit 10, and then you basically cap out. Employer contribution is basically saying 3% plus 50% the next 3. So if you put in 6, you're getting 4.5. And it's assuming 6% return overall, which we feel very comfortable with. So cumulative contributions, cumulative match, and then the total return at $1.3 million. Again, that's the impact and the power of tax deferred savings. And in a few slides, we're going to look at, okay, the break. What if I took off 7 years when I had children? What if I stopped working totally when I had children? What if one of my parents got ill? But you can see here the importance of working and saving from an early age. So again, we all can think that life is going to go this perfect little route. These are some things that can get in the way. I think this is freeze your eggs for your career. It's a pretty bold statement. This is looking at women are twice as likely to retire for personal or family health issues. And again, we as women tend to be the primary caregivers. I think that this is seen probably more than ever this year when we've got young kids at home and they need to be educated online, and maybe they are old enough to do that, or maybe they're not, but it tends to be more women than men who are taking on that extra role. And maybe people want to stay home. This by no means is a presentation to discourage you from staying home with children, but just encouraging you for, if that's your goal, plan for it. Save early, know that that's your goal, and have a plan in place. All right, so this is looking at 3 different scenarios. Only investing 3%. So this was the original we looked at. Somebody who starts at 22, escalates to that 10%, saves from 22 to 65, $1.3 million. If somebody says, okay, I start having children at 32, maybe I have 1 or 2 kids, and then I take off for 7 years, get back when they're back into kindergarten. So I took a 7-year gap. That impact is almost $400,000 over the long haul versus somebody who only invests at 3% and doesn't increase over time. That really impacts too. So it's half of that. So again, you can just see the impact that taking some time off, not increasing your savings has over the long haul. And again, not to say don't take the break, not to say that you always have to work and always have to save. Just know that it's going to impact your family's long-term plan and address it early on. This is somebody who stops working and doesn't contribute the whole time and doesn't invest their money. All right, so these are the three scenarios. No caregiver leave, you can see the 1.3. Sarah takes a 7-year break, a little under $1 million. Maria, caregiver leave, and then doesn't return to the workforce. Again, whether by choice or by, not by choice, 33-year gap, that's where the $400+ thousand comes in. So you can see the impact. And again, if you're not working, you're not likely going to have an employer plan to contribute to. So Roth IRA is an option. Just because you're not working doesn't mean that there are no ways to save for retirement, especially if your spouse is working. So again, you have to plan on
that. But that bottom line, sorry, Liz,
that's okay.
cut you off there. Just going back to the whole reason for all of this, and I think it bears looking at this big picture, and that is to be building this asset that you eventually, later on, will be drawing from. So, life we know is going to throw us curveballs, and whether you can contribute 6% and get the full company match or an additional amount up to 10%, what Liz has been describing throughout is really just keep that savings going and try not to interrupt it. If you're out of the workforce for some time, then be cognizant of the fact that it is, and we're not saying don't stay home with the kids or anything like that, but just understand what that is doing over the long term. And eventually this money is there to draw back out of. And we spend a lot of time here at Blue Heron going through the pre-retirement and the retirement process and creating income out of the assets that have been amassed. So without getting into too much more here, you can clearly see, and this is just using an annuitization calculation for Karen, she could be looking at potentially $90+ thousand from the asset base versus Sarah at 67 versus Maria at 31.
Disclaimer, Martin, those distribution rates, if you do math, it's pretty high. So if that's a liquid nest egg, we're not saying that $95,000 a year is a reasonable income from 1.3 million. So I think that's an important point to make. And again, a whole nother seminar, but to Margie's point, that's annuitization. So if you gave somebody, an insurance company or a company, your money, how much would they pay you? That's what those figures are, not distribution from a liquid nest egg.
Right, just taking it one step further, just to do some real quick math here. Where our comfort level is more along the 4% rule. Look at Sarah at almost $1 million, just easy math. Think of that more as 40,000 in income. And it comes back to the calculation, a distribution rate that I just mentioned of 4 versus an annuitization, which is not likely something that we would be recommending.
So what do you do? I think, we definitely want to provide encouragement. So, the curveballs that could come in and disrupt this, kids would be the good curveball. But maybe there are fertility issues. There were some great stats in here that basically said, fertility treatments range anywhere from $12,000 to $17,000 per round. Adoption can be anywhere from $35,000 to $40,000, not to mention the gap in work. So the biggest thing we would say is if kids and family is on your radar and something that's important to you, whether on your own or with a spouse or a partner, plan for that. Maybe you increase your savings early on and you say, I'm going to do 20% to my 401k until that phase of my life because I know that I'm going to have a gap, or I know that I'm not going to be able to do this forever. The other thing I will say, again, I have a 2-year-old, it's a great way to it's for savings. It gives you that time to have compounding interest, but it also allows you more wiggle room to know what you can afford when you do have childcare expenses and you're paying $100 a month for diapers. So it's a good way to give you, again, for lack of better words, wiggle room when those expenses increase. You don't get used to living on your $50,000 or $100,000. You put most of that towards savings, knowing that in the future you can bring it down if you have to.
So that's a good segue to the next slide. Liz was just talking about babies, and I'm going to take it a step further and talk about when kids come back into the nest. And I spoke about it earlier when we were talking about debt and student loans. And I do truly love these pictures because my kids are much older now. So, you know, the baby picture takes me way back. And then you have all those years of our kids as students. And that third slide, well, what happens if they come back into the nest? And how might that change things on the financial front? So just again, as that segue from where Liz was, let's think in terms of, okay, college graduate, if they're coming out of college in 2020, let's face it, our job market right now is not near what it was 8, 9 months ago at all. So there's a strong likelihood that our kids come back for some period of time. Number one, as a mom, don't make it too comfortable. You know, the goal is raise them up, send them out. Now, in a real serious note, Liz and I have seen, unfortunately, several situations where adult children drain, and it is that, becomes a real deterrent to saving for the future, for their own future and their own eventual retirement. So we've got to keep this in the back of our minds.
I'm gonna jump in real quick too. Sorry, but Margie's point is great there, and that's why we really start with expenses. So imagine that we have started. You knew your kids, you paid that last tuition, and now we're looking at retirement in the next 5 to 10 years for you, and we base it all on expenses. So, you know, what is your lifestyle? Do you like to go out to eat? Do you vacation? And then those expenses are truly the biggest driver for this long-term picture. Where we've seen the impact is, let's just say the expenses are $5,000 a month, and then your adult child comes home or maybe moves to DC, which is in our backyard, and you're helping them to pay rent, and that's an extra $2,000 a month that we have not accounted for. So if you're pre-retirement or even in retirement, increasing those expenses up by that amount is decreasing savings going into retirement, or even worst case scenario, significantly increasing the distributions early in retirement from your nest egg. And that is a huge impact over the long haul to your personal success and not running out of money.
So the big takeaway is, okay, we got to be careful of that adult child drain. Now, on a more positive note, child comes home, young adult comes home from college, they're looking for a job, they find a job, they're looking now for a place to live, or maybe for some period of time they are living at home. Liz mentioned it before, I'll reiterate, that child may not have expenses for the roof over their head, then increasing the amount that goes into the retirement plan through work, increasing or creating a Roth IRA makes a ton of sense, because those expenses, again, are likely to escalate as time goes by. Okay, so let's talk about seniors here. And the older we all get, can't avoid that, we can easily think of loved ones who are in that latter stage, 8th inning, and the stats as outlined here are really, we have to pay attention to this. 7 out of 10 people will require long-term care in their lifetime. What is long-term care? It is providing, other than one's own self, some kind of care, whether it's in the home, in assisted living, in a nursing home, but it's not just a nursing home. So that's kind of a misconception that long-term care insurance only pays for nursing homes. Love the picture here. This is someone going to the home of the senior here, showing him how his blood pressure was for the day. And now we have telemed. So there's all kinds of different answers, and there's all kinds of progress on the medical front. And soon that vaccine will be around. But back to long-term care, sorry, segue. 1/3 of adults over 40 have money set aside for their long-term care. Okay, disconnect, only 1/3 of adults over 40 to answer to 70% of people requiring care. We've got our work cut out for us. Great medical advances, great life expectancies extended, but how are we going to answer to those later in life needs? And then the last stat here, 90% of caregivers are also financial caregivers, directly contributing to the cost of care or helping the recipients keep the recipients' finances in order. A lot of different ways we look at this. I'm going to mention it's very important that financial advisors have a trusted contact on file, just in case we need to reach out to a loved one to say, hey, we're seeing some deficiencies here. Okay, let's talk about getting those ducks in a row in the latter stages of life, and especially for women. Liz talked on it briefly early in today's presentation. I'm going to go a bit more into the Social Security discussion because there's some different caveats that will and are applicable depending on whether there's divorce situations, widow situations. But let's first talk about what creates that Social Security benefit, and that is going to be work history and incomes. That's what drives that eventual Social Security payment. Now, for those who have not been in the workforce, they're entitled to half of their spouses if they don't have Social Security history and benefits on their own, and or perhaps those are more attractive than their own. Second bullet down, 82% of women entitled to survivor benefits, so think again about the widows, 82% of women entitled to their survivor benefits and their own retirement benefits would have received a higher monthly amount if they knew they could take those benefits, or delay their own benefits until age 70. How many times do we see this, Liz? Frequently. And even on the divorce front, that comes up, well, the funny kind of side of it is, well, will my ex-husband know? The ex-husband does not find out if you start taking half of those Social Security benefits. We could spend the next hour on Social Security alone, but the point is to know what options are available for you.
Yep, and on Social Security too, just know that it's a permanent decision, especially if you make any decisions before full retirement age. So that's a common, it's a huge piece. Again, you can see that women rely on it more. Just know that it's not a decision that you want to make lightly. You want to make an educated decision because 9 times out of 10 it's a permanent decision, and it's a big piece of the financial picture long term.
So on the health side, again, we didn't really get into this so much 10, 15 years ago, but it is so vitally important today. Look at these numbers, the guys to the gals here. Let's assume both are retiring at age 65. However, the woman's life expectancy is that much longer. In this case, she's already started taking out her Medicare payments and the out-of-pocket cost. So footnote, Medicare is not it, cut and dry. That's not your only medical expense.
And it's not all free.
The supplementary policy needs to be in place and all those other ancillary costs. So this study is showing the Medicare and out-of-pocket costs during this woman's lifetime to be $433,000 versus the male at $350,000. I mean, that's $108,000 in the last 4 years of her life that she's spending, not including long-term care insurance. I mean, these are staggering numbers. So how are we going to address this? Well, first we're going to look at something kind of funny. And I say kind of funny, but, as Liz said, one of our other funny slides, you just got to laugh because here's that little baby and we see these various stages of life. Of course, I'm like, okay, which one do I fall into? But, thinking about the grandmas out there and after all those life stages and well, that sucked. Anyway, it's pretty funny. But I will say this quote at the bottom, a woman's greatest strength is knowing when to get help. I mean, we are the ones that are going to ask for directions, right? So we're going to use that as very much a positive. The next quote on the next page, I think is a good one too. And this is Marianne Williamson. For those who don't know her, she was a presidential candidate. And she said, I do believe 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50. Oh, maybe 60 can be the new 40. I don't know. I believe that when we give ourselves permission, we can live with an excitement and heat and passion that most women in previous generations were unable to attain. And I think we can all agree to that.
Yep.
So we've covered a lot. We've got a bit more to go through. I always like to stop, kind of regroup, think about where we are, think about what we've talked about. One is identifying your needs. If we can share, if you would like to have a look at our cash flow worksheet, it is an excellent exercise regardless of your station in life. Meeting with your advisor, again, we are Blue Heron Financial Group, and we work with clients really all over the country, and have been doing this for quite some time, and we've got a very strong team here. And if it's not us and you're working with an advisor, great. It's just vitally important to be having a close working relationship, close trusted working relationship. And then building your plan. That's where everything starts at Blue Heron, is building that plan. If you said, oh, I've got $1 million I just won at the lottery, invest it for us. That's just not how we work. We start with building that plan. What are your needs? What are your goals? And going from there. All right. A few other things. I'm going to go back to those younger ages and think about, okay, what would I tell maybe my daughters or my daughter's friends? Well, my daughters have been the daughters of financial advisors for a long time, and I'm very proud of them because I think they have a very good head on their shoulders as far as their financial lives. But let's go over these bullets here. Maintaining a healthy credit score, making a budget, save steadily. That's dollar cost averaging. Liz talked about that. It's buying into, investing into markets. Even when they're going down, you're buying more. It's like it's like the market's on sale. Who doesn't like a good sale? Understand the employer benefits and don't just start and stop with a retirement plan. On the marriage front, relationship front, think about how you're going to have ongoing financial discussions. Find out as much as possible early on, and then continuing to have that, again, I call it the summit meeting, to make sure that you're staying on the same page and you're looking out, because 5, 10, 15 years will go by in no time, and on it goes. And maxing out your 401k. There's still misconceptions out there on what maxing out your 401k is. It's not simply putting in as much as the company matches you on. We looked earlier at what 6% and a possible company match of 4.5% is. Sometimes there's no company match at all. Sometimes there's more. Maxing out is putting in whatever the government is allowing us to put into our plan. This year, in 2020, if you're over 50, you can put $26,000 in there. Am I right on that, Liz? I got to just double check.
19,500 if you're under 50.
Yeah. And what was that number again?
19,500.
19.5. So it goes up well, I shouldn't say that. It has gone up most years, but finding out what the under 50 max amount is, as well as the over 50, because there's a catch-up provision.
Yep.
So for our parents, this little app here is called Evernote. And whether it's Evernote or it's something else, let's use technology to the benefit of our parents, our seniors, as well as for us. Let's face it, we're not necessarily in the same even community anymore as our aging parents. This Evernote is talking about just legal documents. That's what the reference here is. And how even if you're some states away, you can have that healthcare directive for your parents right on your phone. And or just think about even the medical devices they can wear on their wrist and around their necks. There's so much technology that's available, and our parents know how to use it. My dad's 82 years old, and he's done everything from DocuSign on his phone to FaceTime, and on it goes. So let's use it to the full potential in caring for our parents. This is a reference to something called the family love letter. And so many times, and I will say especially parents, tend to be very private about what their wishes are. I do believe that laying out one's wishes in some kind of legal document, some kind of written document, is a great gift to the next generation to know that there's a resource that we know what mom or dad wants. So this is just one, the family love letter. Another one is called 5 Wishes. So while you can do the financial stuff, and we'll talk about the estate planning in just a second, there's also this softer underside of documenting, or maybe it's even things like, I want to bequeath this piece of jewelry to so-and-so because it has this meaning. But the point of any of this is to write things down while we've got our wits about us and not waiting to even think, well, what did mom mean by such and such? So we're coming to the end here. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about estate planning. And there are a lot of different parts to the estate planning. Liz has a minor child. That's a whole different consideration because she's thinking about, oh, if something happens to her son's, well, to her and her husband, then what? So guardianship is very important, and the financial side, of course. As we get older, we talked about beneficiaries early on in the presentation, and whether it's a live person or maybe it's a charitable entity, having a good estate planning meeting with an attorney to flush out, should there be a revocable living trust, in which case you are naming within the trust certain beneficiaries, or perhaps again it's a charitable organization. And then there's this other part that takes the estate tax into consideration. Having wills, very important again, because even if you have beneficiaries on your 401k or your Roth IRA or your mutual fund account or credit union or bank accounts, something that's stating the other pieces of one's wealth is very important. We've talked about directives. Healthcare directives, extremely important. Durable powers of attorney. We've run into this in a couple different situations where mom or dad have had health issues, and having an adult child come to us, if they don't have a power of attorney in place, there's only so much of a conversation we can have. So making sure that all these documents are in good order. The financial plan, that's something we do here at Blue Heron, and we work one-on-one with the attorneys in making sure that plans are in place. Who's going to take care of mom if dad's not here? What if his pension stops? How is mom going to continue to live? Do they have long-term care? I mentioned charitable beneficiaries, but maybe there's part of one's estate planning that will be ongoing in terms of contributions to charitable entities. Have it in writing. And this last point of staying educated. There's a lot of resources online, enough to certainly get some foundation, but working with a trusted attorney along with a trusted financial advisor, we believe is the best recipe there.
All right, so just a quick summary. How to use strategies to help with financial success. Establish a budget, again, no matter where you are in life. And again, whether that is you kind of lay a baseline for what you think you're going to spend and then start tracking it. You know, that there's plenty of apps out there that can help you track. Again, we're happy to share our spreadsheet just to give you some idea of what is your lifestyle cost. Know your income needs later in life. Again, this really is where people often say, how much money do I need? To Margie's point, you know, earlier, if somebody says, I have $1 million, is that enough? It depends on your expenses, and that's why it's so important to know your expenses. Diversify, again, from a tax standpoint, diversify from an investment standpoint. All of those things are very important. Dollar cost averaging. So again, consistently saving. You're not going to try and time the market and just being diligent about saving every single paycheck or once a month is going to help you over the long haul. Consider staying in the market even when scared. This is where having a professional advisor is really helpful. I think 5 and 6 go hand in hand. You don't want to be emotional when it comes to your investments. You know, we want to understand how you feel about money, because money is definitely, you know, it's different for everybody. But taking that emotion out of it to a degree and having an objective, sound opinion is really important. Set financial limits for adult kids if they return home. Again, I think that that's a benefit for everybody. If there's not just this, you can, you know, do what you want and we'll pay every single penny forever. I think that is detrimental to both sides. Have goals. So again, you know, life is going to throw us curveballs, but set your goals, work towards those goals. And it really is pretty empowering when you see them come to fruition. Know what your backup plan is. So again, Margie and I often say we plan for worst case scenario, hope for best. That's where that liquid cash reserve savings is so important. It gives you a lot of flexibility, will help you sleep at night, and will help you to formulate the backup plan and get that in place if plan A doesn't really work out as you had originally planned. And again, stay educated. Marge and I are firm believers in really just, you know, staying apprised of what your options are and working with somebody who will help you to do that. Because you have a full-time job, you might have kids at home, you know, life can be really busy. This isn't what you do full-time, but it's not that you couldn't, it's just that you need kind of the, I'll say, Reader's Digest version, and making sure that you know what your options are and that are what's best for you.
Yeah, and we do send out a weekly market commentary if you're interested in that. Again, we will have our our contact information that you can reach the office, and we'd be happy to share that with you.
Yep.
So
again, we welcome questions. This is our website, has some good information. We have a Facebook page. To Margie's point, we also send out a weekly market commentary. If you want to be added to that, you can email Debbie. Debbie is wonderful, and she can get you added to that list. So Debbie.Schilling@LPL. You're also welcome to call our office. But again, we hopefully gave you some things to think about, and we're here as a resource if you have any questions.
Thank you for your attention, and have a wonderful day.